Okay, so good evening, everyone, and Om Shanti. My name is Priya, and I live in Sydney, as Jackie said. So I'm just going to share a few slides to talk to on the subject of the magnetic mind, and I think we'll have a bit of time for some questions at the end. Okay, so this title of the magnetic mind is over the years that we've, well, I say we because originally when we came up with the title, there was someone who actually happened to live in Melbourne, and we were having a phone catch up after not, having seen each other for quite a while. And they're a fellow meditator as well. And he was talking about stuff that was happening in his life and how he had just had a car accident, and fortunately, he was fine, but the car was written off, and I was going through some challenging relationships at work, and the conversation kind of steered towards, what are the chances that even these things that were unfolding in our lives or happening in our lives at the time were a result of our own minds drawing them into our lives. So we had, occasionally in the past run retreats together or facilitated retreats together, and that gave rise to this title of the magnetic mind. So let's explore what our interpretation of the magnetic mind was in the context of those events, and what inspired this title. So I'm sure that many of you have heard of the law of attraction and The Secret, which came out, I think, in the early 2000s sometime, and that I suppose the book and the movie really popularized the idea that we attract, or we have the capacity to use the power of our mind to attract things that we want into our lives. So this illustration here shows how we can kind of set our minds on objects that we desire, whether that's money or a flashy new car, or jewelry, a mansion, all of the things that we would like to think makes our life, happier. And so that was kind of the premise of The Secret, and that's something that many people are familiar with. And when we talk about the magnetic mind, it's easy to kind of make that association. And when we've actually run this as a retreat in the past, we've found that some people come to the retreat with that expectation as well. But when we think of this topic or this subject through the spiritual lens, which is obviously what we study and practice here at the Brahma Kumaris, it takes on a slightly different meaning. So whilst the formula, if you like, is the same of how the law of attraction works, it's less about drawing physical or material things into our lives, which will make us happier. And instead, it's focused on the inner qualities that fulfill us. So what, in a nutshell, if I kind of just take away one thing from tonight's session, it's that I will attract into my life what I am and not what I want. So this is the kind of deeper realization that we arrive at when we study the power of the mind and the ability that we have as beings that have the capacity to create our reality. But what we learn in, I suppose, the knowledge of Raj Yoga, or the spiritual study that we study here, is that it comes back to who I am, and the external reality is going to mirror who I am. So the external reality that I experience as my everyday reality is basically a mirror of who I am rather than what I want. So this is something to reflect on in understanding the deeper aspects of the magnetic power of the mind. So what this slide says, and as you can read it, I hope everyone can see my slides actually, because I'm just continuing to present, assuming that you can. If there's anyone who can't see the slides, perhaps you can pop a message in the chat. But so I am, and these are extremely powerful words, because whatever it is that I choose to put after I am is going to actually determine my experience of life. So whether I choose to say, I am powerful or I am weak, that is going to manifest as my reality. So it's and this is something which obviously is all about my inner conversation and how I'm speaking to my own mind. So it really helps to have that strong spiritual foundation, which reminds me of the truth of who I am. Because when I understand the truth of who I am, then I have a rich reservoir of qualities and attributes and virtues that I can place after I am. But if I don't have that treasure chest or reservoir of qualities to dip into, then the natural tendency is for us to fall back into the conditioning that we've had in our minds for a long time, and a lot of that conditioning tends to be either weak or wasteful or negative. And so if I'm, if my identity is based on those types of attributes, then understandably the experience that follows that is going to be negative as well, or it's going to be something that's not ideal. So the key for me to understand how I can change my capacity to draw good things into my life is to understand who I am, basically. And when we study Raj Yoga and the spiritual knowledge, ultimately where we arrive at is the realization that everything that I am seeking in life is already within me. So as you'd understand, I'm talking about the eternal, imperishable qualities, which we can't buy in the supermarket, or no amount of money that we have can acquire those qualities. So I might be able to acquire or amass physical things through using the power of my thought and subsequently the actions that follow to acquire that. But the real valuable or invaluable, rather, things that make our lives meaningful. So the things such as, the experience of peace, the experience of love, the experience of true happiness, the experience of wisdom. These are all things which we can't place a price tag on because they cannot be bought and sold. And where we find them is within ourselves. So something to reflect on. The significance of this phrase, I am, and we may not be conscious of it, but we're constantly thinking that in our day. So to be mindful of that, or to be aware of that, is very helpful. The kind of dialogue that I'm having with myself. So what I am, and what I place after I am in this space, is what's going to get projected and returned to me in my external reality. So what that makes me is basically a living magnet. So each of us is walking around as a living magnet, and what I attract into my life is as I said a few slides ago, it's less to do with what I want. So it's less about I'm going to attract into my life what I want, but as the slide said, what we attract into our life is what we are. So who we are, or what I am, is what's going to determine what I'm able to draw into my life. And the reason for that is to do with the vibrational match of the consciousness that I'm holding, of I am, so I am peaceful, or I am powerful, or I am confident, and that vibration, which is obviously because it's a positive consciousness or a positive state of mind, the vibration is high, is elevated. And if I'm creating, a pattern of thinking that is vibrating at that level, then I will attract the matching experience, the experience that I have in my physical reality, which is a vibrational match to what I'm holding in here. So that's essentially why this slide says that we attract into our lives what is in harmony with our dominant thoughts. So, many of you have perhaps done retreats or done the introductory course to Raj Yoga, and there's a lot of discussion in the introductory course about the faculties of the soul, the mind, the intellect, and the subconscious mind. And we know as part of that study that our conscious mind tends to be a very busy place. So we have a lot of thoughts, but and a lot of times we're not even aware of what those thoughts are until we actually start, to take a breath and start the practice of meditation, and then we start to pay more attention to what's happening on the screen of our minds. But when we do that, we also start to realize that there are certain patterns of thinking that each of us has that we tend to gravitate to. So it's like a groove on a record which keeps playing, and that's what we experience as our dominant thoughts. So, for example, if I have certain fears, or if I have a lot of self-doubt, or if I have a critical nature, or if I am, a very sweet person, or so the things which we tend to that tends to play in our minds a lot is a big influence in what we're attracting into our lives. And we see this play out in many ways. For example, if you have a challenging relationship in the family or in the workplace, and you change that relationship, so you leave this relationship and you go into another relationship, or if you change jobs, or if you change companies that you work for, it's not, and you feel that you've kind of you've left that discomfort or that challenge behind, but it doesn't take very long before that reappears in our lives. And the reason for that is because we're the creator, right? So because I've not actually resolved that pattern of thinking in my mind, even though I've changed my environment, that problem rears its head again. So the characters that are in the scene have changed, perhaps, but the same dynamic is there. And that's because of our dominant thoughts. So yeah. So to expand a little bit on what we just talked about, that we are living magnets and we attract or draw to ourselves that which is in harmony with our dominant thoughts. And as I mentioned, it's all about that vibrational match of what I'm holding in here or what I'm creating, that I am consciousness is what gets mirrored in the external reality. So we understand that our thoughts are extremely powerful. And as this image shows us, thoughts are effectively the seeds. And when we have, as human beings, so as a spiritual being who's embodied in this physical costume, the reason we have this physical costume is to perform actions. So we're not just going around creating thoughts, but we actually have to perform actions as well. But the sequence is that what precedes the action, which is what is visible because it's on the physical, tangible level, is the thought, which is invisible, and it's the seed. So if I want, as you can see, thoughts lead to actions, to habits, to characters, and ends up as my destiny. So the quality of the seed is critical, right? So everything starts as a thought, and then we perform actions based on the thoughts that we create. And when our actions are repeated, so this is that kind of dominant thinking process that we touched on earlier. When particular actions are repeated, they take the form of our habits, and our habits, or the collection of our habits, basically shapes our character or our personality, you could say. And those of you who've kind of done the Raj Yoga course, you would be familiar with this word sanskars. And sanskars is the Hindi word which basically means the deep rooted personality traits, so the deep impressions in our subconscious that form our personality. So thoughts, actions, habits, our character, and as is my character, so it will be my destiny. So there's a journey that we're all going through on a daily basis, right? So what we often see in our lives and what we see playing out in the lives of others and on the world stage at large is the destiny. So we're seeing that manifest, but when we understand the the spiritual foundation is actually the seed of my thought. And if I want to transform my destiny, so if I feel that my destiny is not so good, or my destiny could be better, or I have a lot of potential and I want to realize my destiny, then what I need to really focus on to transform that, the end result, is the seed, which is my thoughts. So if the seed is powerful, if the seed is a good quality seed, then the tree that emerges from that as my destiny is going to be rich and fruitful. And the opposite is also true. So this is a famous quote by Henry Ford, and some of you have perhaps read it or heard about it, and you can probably finish the quote as well. So it's, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. So, and this is, something which is really worth wrapping our heads around, because whether we, consciously pay attention to our minds or not, that magnetic power of the mind is at work, right? So everything that's happened today, from the time I woke up till now, I've been creating my reality based on my consciousness and the thoughts that I've been holding in my mind. And so whether I think I can or I think I can't, both are right? Because I've created that based on my thoughts. So now I just have a few quotes to kind of further illustrate this topic. So our mind is a magnet, and if I think of blessings, I attract blessings. If I think of problems, I attract problems, and therefore I should always cultivate good thoughts and always remain optimistic. And especially at this time, I think it's not difficult for us to appreciate how important it is for us to almost deliberately and intentionally look after the health of our minds, because on an external level, we're seeing a lot of upheaval and chaos. So it's quite easy for us to be impacted by that in a negative way, right? So when we are creating thoughts, that seed is not operating in a vacuum, in a way. So what I mean by that is the seed is obviously being influenced by a lot of external things which are contributing to its growth. And in this case, I'm talking about the environment that we're in. And so, without kind of spelling out all the things that are wrong in the world today, we're all very aware of that. But despite that, or in spite of that, if I can actually really appreciate how I am creating my individual reality, and if each of us, if there's 20 or 30 of us on this call right now, then if each of us makes the effort to actually look after the health of my inner space and realize that whatever I'm holding in here is going to create my external reality, then if we take that responsibility, then whilst the 30 of us create a positive reality for ourselves, that's how, you know, the ripple effect of creating a change in the wider world also happens. Right, so we can either get absorbed by the external negativity and allow that to inform the thoughts that we create, and therefore we're going to be amplifying and multiplying the negativity that's out there. Or if we want to shift that external negativity, then it has to start in here. And we create that ripple effect by doing it collectively. So I quite personally, I quite like this one. So it's, whether you say the universe or God, choose the language that suits you. But the quote says this: the universe is not punishing us, it's not blessing us, it's not controlling us. The universe is responding to the vibration that we are creating. So when I think happy, happiness comes to me. And if I think negatively, then negativity comes to me. So what I'm putting out into the universe is what's going to echo back to me. So that's the principle, right? That who I am and what I am is going to determine what is drawn back to me as my experience. So now there's quite a bit on this slide, and I'm sure that many of you have heard about Dr. Emoto, this Japanese scientist who did some tests on the effect of our thoughts and words on water. And if you haven't heard of it, or if it's the first time you're seeing it, there's a web link down the bottom of the slide where you can look up more about it, or Google Emoto. Now I realise that there is some people out there who say that these studies are a bit contentious, or they're not foolproof. But I think it's up to each of us to decide whether the studies were valid. But for me personally, I really do believe in the power of the mind over matter, and anyway, the gist of the study was that he basically placed these words on jars with water, and so for example, you've got thank you, love and gratitude, and then down the bottom you've got the different religions. And then you've also got you fool. So you can see how the shape of the water crystals. So when the water was when the labels were applied on this water, and people would actually send that thought to the water. So and then when the water was frozen, it shaped. The shape of the crystals is what you see here, the result, basically. So it's interesting to see how the label of you fool basically has resulted in a very distorted water crystal, and all of the positive expressions have resulted in really pretty and pretty and colourful formations, crystal formations, and also what you see with the religions is that they're all distinct and unique, but equally beautiful. So, and then finally, so Dr. Emoto actually he travelled to Mount Abu, which is the headquarters of the Brahmakumaris in Rajasthan in India. Yes, so it actually says there this was in 2009 when he travelled there, and so you've got at the top of the slide you see Devi Janki, who was a former head of the Brahmakumaris. She passed away last year at the age of 104. So what Dr. Emoto did, he travelled to Madhubana, to Mount Abu, as a guest of Brahmakumaris for a retreat, and he wanted to experiment on the power of thought of the crystals. So he'd already been doing these experiments, but he wanted to do it in this setting. So he placed a bowl of water in front of Dadi as she was doing meditation in the early morning, and then he obviously took that water back to his lab, and when the water was frozen, so you can see the before and after. So the water crystals before the meditation, and the pattern of the water crystals after the meditation. So this is one kind of example of the power of our thoughts, and the effect that it has on matter and how it shapes things. I'm sure you've actually heard and read about stories of how people have been able to grow plants in very unfertile kind of environments, and using the power of thought, or even in your own garden, how if you actually show love and care, and perhaps even talk to your plants, they respond to that. So this is the power of our mind. And of course, when it comes to water, it always bears mentioning that as we know, our bodies are largely water. Something like 60 or 70% of the content of our body is water. And so the water is always listening, right? And so what I say after I am, right? So if I say that I am not good enough, or I am hopeless, or I am weak, then the body is also absorbing those vibrations, and it gives the return of that. So yeah, that's why it's always beneficial to be mindful, even when we think it's one thing, but when it comes to the relationship between mind and matter, and particularly as it relates to our own bodies, like when we drink a glass of water, for example, to actually express gratitude for the water, and take a second to actually send that positive energy to the water before drinking it, and having that mindfulness even when we cook our food and eat our food, it has a big impact on our experience and health. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to share with you on this topic of the magnetic mind. I don't actually know if everything's been coming through clearly. I hope so, that you've been able to hear and see the slides as well. But I might pause here now and check in with Jackie to see if there are any questions.
Oh, thank you, Priya. That was very clear and very precise, and very, the examples were wonderful. And certainly, you know, when you reminded us of how much of the body is water, and how when thoughts are so powerful, such an effect of that work in a magnetic way of attraction, that our thoughts would have a feeling on our body, would create a feeling in our bodies after meditation, if we have been able to kind of have that vibrational intention of being peaceful. So it's open to you who have shared the session with us to make any comments or ask any questions. I was also thinking, while you're doing that, while you're thinking, Priya, when you said, however we think of the higher power, the universe or the supreme soul, or to connect with that, and even when we wish to attract good wishes from the universe, and certainly when we want to connect with the supreme soul, as we call that one. And as you were also saying, that one can't influence our destiny, but like any helpful parent can experience, we can experience, if we're on that vibrational level, love and perhaps some advice in that connection, and certainly power and strength. So
absolutely, yeah. Actually, that's you've reminded me of perhaps one last point that I'll make, and that is because we're talking about the magnetic mind, when you have a physical magnet and the magnet has somehow lost its magnetic force, or if it's become weak, then the way that they actually magnetize that weak magnet is by bringing it into close proximity to a strong magnet. And then they match the poles, so the North Pole to the South Pole and the South Pole to the North Pole. And just that closeness of the weak magnet and the strong magnet remagnetizes the weak magnet. So that's what we're doing in meditation. And when we kind of practice filling ourselves with power by connecting with that source of supreme power.
And Raja Yoga, as you've explained too, provides the method that meditation should follow to get onto that vibrational level.
Yeah, that's right. So the first step of Raja Yoga is to understand who I am, because if I don't know who I am, that essentially I'm not a physical being, but a spiritual being, sitting in the costume of the body, and that my form is a living star, and I am energy, and that the supreme soul is the parent of either soul. So by understanding that, it enables me to dissolve the physical identity and everything that's connected to that, so that I can just become myself again and travel upwards and forge that link or that connection with the source to recharge, to remagnetize.
It's a very powerful image that you're creating there. If there are any questions on that, if you want that to be expanded, anyone, I think it's a very interesting point. And certainly when we relate it to how our thoughts, which the mirror of our thoughts are our words and our actions, then we can see how there's a different concept of destiny. Most of us, in the world, people think that whatever's happening to them, if it's a small thing, they blame others. If it's a big thing, they blame God. But how actually we are responsible for our own destiny. This is a very interesting point to expand on. But let me have a look at the chat, Priya.
Okay, yeah.
This first one is comment is, I think the image of the magnet in the mind is a good reminder of how our thoughts create our reality. So someone agreeing with us. And then appreciation. Thank you, Priya. This is really profound. Can our thoughts really attract and connect with the soul world and souls who have gone there? Well, it's a little bit too. Okay, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So yes, our thoughts can connect to the soul world. And when I say soul world, and certainly in the context of the study of Raj Yoga, the soul world refers to the home of souls, which is where we originally come from and where we eventually return to at the end of the cycle of time. But it's also the home or the residence, the place of residence of that supreme soul, that the mother and father of all souls in the world. And so the way to connect with that being and with the home of souls, or the soul world, is by becoming soul conscious ourselves, or just rather being soul conscious, and that requires some practice, because we've been very conditioned to thinking of ourselves as bodies, as bodies, as genders, as the different kind of roles and responsibilities we play. So it takes a bit of practice to allow all of that to kind of just melt away and become that living star, just be that point of light. And like you see behind Jackie, that beautiful image, and that kind of point at the center of the rays is who I am. And I don't have any physical dimensions. I'm an infinitesimal point of light, and I'm sitting in the center of the forehead, very deep inside, in the brain, and I am driving this body, and I'm using the senses of the body to experience life. So I have to kind of dissolve that physical consciousness and return to being that star, that living star, that point of light, that conscient energy. So the energy that's able to think, that has consciousness. And then when I'm able to do that, I am light enough to travel upwards. So it's not that I'm leaving my body, but while sitting here, I'm able to feel as if I'm taking my thoughts beyond and going into the soul world. So that's something that I need to practice for me to have an experience with it.
Because if you're going up, are you going against gravity? You might need some powerful thoughts. Huh?
Yeah.
And,
and fewer thoughts as well.
Fewer thoughts and
Yeah,
powerful thoughts.
Yeah.
And what would you call powerful thoughts, Priya?
I think powerful thoughts are, I am, like thoughts that are really connected to our original truth. And when I am able to step into that, or in other words, accept that is who I am, then there's real power.
Yeah. And the power comes from your experience, doesn't it? I mean, knowledge is knowledge, and you need knowledge, of course, to experience something. But once you've experienced it, you can't doubt it. Is that right for you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's when we are on this journey, and perhaps any spiritual practice or any spiritual path, the only way that we can prove to ourselves that we're doing it right, or that this is taking me somewhere, is if I have an experience. So I have to experiment, and by experimenting, it means that I take these points of knowledge, for example, what we've heard today, or what you've been reading, etc., along this subject, and then practicing it, basically. So.
If also we know that from Brahma Kumari's Raja Yoga that God doesn't interfere in our lives, in a sense, but is available to give a powerful, as you said, to the rusty magnet, when it connects to the powerful magnet, to remove some of that rust. And it's the power of certain things as experiences. It seems to me the power of love, the power to clarify the mind, the strength to have confidence in something. Do you want to expand on any of that from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for me, a big one has been the power of love. Like, I think I am definitely quite a left-brained person, so it's I go looking for the explanation of things. So for me, when I kind of studied Raj Yoga, it took a while to really digest things, and I had to validate things for myself. But what completely disarmed me, if you like, in a spiritual sense of the word, was the experience of God's love in meditation. So the power comes in the form of love. It comes in the form of clarity, as you said, like realization. So if I've been thinking about something for a long time and I've not had any breakthroughs, and as is usually the case, and certainly is for me, it's when you actually put something on the back burner, that's when the breakthroughs come. So if you kind of just keep trying to think about something very hard, I don't always find that that's very effective. But putting something on the back burner, what I mean by that is you create some space. It's like, okay, you take a break from overthinking something, or kind of stressing too much about something. And when there is that space, then it's like God's light can actually come in and help me see the answer, or the reality.
We use a lot too in Raj Yoga the word transformation rather than change. And so it's quite significant to transform energy from kind of being, we use the terms wasteful or let alone negative, into something that's positive and of a high elevated kind. Transformation. Do you want to expand on that a little?
Yeah. Well, on the theme of magnets, I remember actually when some years ago, I can't remember how long ago, maybe about 20 years ago, I was I'd gone to Mount Abu, to Madhuban, which is the headquarters of the BKs in India, on my kind of annual visit. And I remember listening to one of the teachers, and he was French, and he'd been practicing Raj Yoga for some years, and he was sharing this lovely example which left an impression. He was telling a story of how when he was a little boy, he would spend a lot of time with his grandmother, and his grandmother used to do a lot of sewing, and she would have all these little pins which she'd use as part of the sewing process to hold things together, etc. And at the end of the day, there'd all be all these pins strewn across the carpet. And he always liked to, kind of spend time with his grandmother, and wanted to help her, or get involved in what she was doing. And so she would involve him by getting him to collect the pins at the end of the day. And what she would do is she gave him a magnet and said to him, okay, use this magnet to go and collect the pins. So he would use the magnet, and he would go and, pick up the pins. And after a little while, the two kind of ends of the magnet were covered entirely with pins, but there were still more pins to pick up. But as he kept going, he found that the pins kept being pulled to the magnet. And what he realized is that the magnets that first made contact with, the pins that first made contact with the magnet became magnetized themselves. And they had the ability, they'd been transformed from merely being pins to have a magnetic force themselves. And so they were able to then pick up other magnets. So I think that's kind of how transformation works, in a way, in the spiritual sense. Yeah,
it is. It's a wonderful example. I was thinking that because when you have some knowledge, and certainly some experience which convinces you of the power of the knowledge, then we want to share it, or we want to. The generosity comes from that feeling of wanting to share things with others. But of course, this day and age, you would have to phrase that very carefully. God hasn't got a very good reputation, so an understanding of a benevolent, higher form of energy is really required. Huh?
Absolutely, yeah. I was actually reading a Murali, which is like the kind of daily
class.
Study. Yeah, the daily class that we study at the Brahma Kumaris, and there was a point about how the way that you have an impact on others in the spiritual dimension is by you becoming spiritually attractive. And in the same way that the needle is automatically drawn to the magnet doesn't actually have to say to the needle, come to me. So when you just focus on making that effort on yourself, or practicing the knowledge in the form of imbibing the virtues and the qualities, then you basically become that. And when you embody that, it is attractive.
Yeah. And that's what people want today, isn't it? They're fed up with being told how to do things, and you should do this and that and the other thing, but they want to see results. Yes. And when it becomes a natural part of your nature, then you don't even have to think about it yourself, do you? There is something else, but you might just have a look.
Yeah.
So this is another appreciative comment. This is so true. We can't just know, read, or be told these ideas. We must actually experience and feel it. And we're agreeing with that. Whoever wrote that was certainly agreeing with it. But there are methods, and the Brahmakumaris teaches methods. Would you agree? Methods that enable that to be easier. Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. So there is some structure to what we study, and there's anyone who's done the introductory course to Raj Yoga, you would know that the basic lesson is to first understand the self and then get to know the relationship of the self with the divine, with the supreme, and then to understand the context of how the knowledge of the self relates to the world and everything that's playing out in the world. We also understand the philosophy of karma, because we're not living in. I was going to say we're not living in a bubble, but at the moment it kind of feels like we are living in a bubble.
Yes.
So so we don't live in an isolated way normally. Like, we do have interactions with others, and so that's where karma comes in. And so understanding all of these different aspects is what gives us the ability to make sense of the world and how we fit into the world. But ultimately, what is also at the heart of the study of Raj Yoga is that we can only take responsibility for ourselves in terms of changing ourselves. So it's not my responsibility to change others or change anyone else. Each of us has to make that effort for ourselves, and we have the support of the Supreme Self, the one who can kind of cleanse us and remagnetize us and return that power that we've lost. So yeah.
That's quite lovely.
Yeah.
All right, so we're asking for experience. So is it okay? Would you like to lead us in a reflection?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll take this opportunity of thanking you very much for bursting the bubble in New South Wales and coming to Melbourne.
Yeah.
And to be with us. We appreciate it a lot, Priya. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's finish with a few minutes of meditation. I'll just speak a few words and then we can experience some silence. So, sitting upright, I rest my gaze on a point in front of me. I take a few deep breaths. And as I feel the oxygen circulating throughout my body, I feel my body relaxing into stillness. Now I take my attention away from everything around me. And I place my awareness in the center of my forehead. I visualize myself as a soft white star. Sitting between my brows. deep inside my head. This is the seat of I, the soul. From this point, of focused attention, I reflect on who I am. Who I really am. And as I visualize this sparkling white light in the center of my forehead, I feel myself experiencing a deep peace. I, the soul, am the creator of my reality. As is the seed of thought that I hold in my mind, so will be the reality of my experience. Now I visualize a soft thread of white light that connects me to the home beyond. The land of nirvana, the land beyond sound, is my original home. And in the home, I see and I feel the supreme light. That that soul who is the mother, the father of I, the soul. Just as everything in nature turns its face upwards to the sun to re-energize, I connect my thoughts to the supreme light, and I feel God's rays of light and love gently fill my being. I visualize it and I feel it. And any time that I feel a little empty, a little lost, and in need, I can turn my attention to this divine source. To fill myself and restore the power of my mind. Now I bring my attention back to the room around me. And I sit absorbing the power the silence and the feeling of being full. Om Shanti. Om I am. Shanti.